We are definitely live on Facebook. All right. It is the 27th of September, 2022. We are having episode 1 of the Gender Exchange online series. My name is Nosana Sondiyazi. We have a special guest with us tonight, Savuka Matyila from Gender Dynamics. And people are probably wondering, what is this gender exchange? What are we going to be talking about? What are we going to be exchanging? Are we swapping genitals? Are we going to exchange things like that in that gender department? No. It's an exchange of ideas. It's an exchange of understanding what is gender, right? Last year, December, we had a wonderful Indaba, the gender affirming Indaba. And there were so many questions left unanswered. There were so many areas in which we didn't know how are we going to move on from there, right? We had fantastic guests and different theories of the history of gender, where we come from, where we hope to go to, and where we hope to access hormone replacement therapy, surgery, different things that people are thinking, oh, that's just beauty, that's just cosmetics, that's just superficial. And now we're going to be speaking to different experts, different activists, different thinkers, different genders. And we're going to be asking, what is your lifestyle? What is your expertise? What is your thinking? What's your advice? What do you suggest, right? And to start us off today, you see them right there next to me, and you were tempted by their profile, you were tempted by their picture. And Savuka is a gender non-conforming human rights activist born in Mdantsane, Eastern Cape, with a decade's experience working with civil rights organizations. Savuka's work targets legal, clinical, educational, and community-based fronts through both local and international spheres, right? A degree in sociology, philosophy, and gender, religion, and health honors studies inspires Savuka to seek out possibilities for community. We're going to hear more. You guys have seen this, and right now, Savuka, welcome to the Gender Exchange. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much for inviting me, Nosana, and for the warm introduction. Hello to all of the viewers today. My name is Savuka. My pronouns are they and them. By no means am I an expert on gender and stuff like that, but I'm happy to share some of my experience, I think, in relation to some of the work that I do, my own expressions of gender, sexuality, and maybe having a hearty conversation with Nosana and the rest of you viewers, if you can pop in your questions or join in however you can.
Yeah. Yes, please. We are not going to be able to always be checking in on Facebook, but I will certainly do so. But the main thing is, as we talk, please just put in your comments. If maybe there's something that we pass on or something that you're curious about that we don't touch on, or if you've got any expectations for today, please share them with us so that we can kind of get to it, right? But basically, please excuse me while I get to another screen on this side, multitasking, right? Basically, you know, I'm very curious, Savugane. When I met you, I don't think you saw what I saw that excited me so much to have you as our first special guest, because our topic is an interesting one, right? Our topic is androgynous, non-binary, sexy human rights. So when you looked at the topic, what did you think? What did you think, you know, was that we were going to be encompassing with all those different topics of sexy human rights, androgynous, non-binary?
I actually love the combination. Obviously, there is some type of relationship between the way in which we express our genders and sexuality. There were some instances in literature and conversations I've heard that speaks about the erotic and how the erotic is an essential part of our own expressions. The very desire to live, to move, to want is charged by a sexual energy of sorts. Liking a friend is imbued with sexual energy. So to come make get us to unearth all of the interesting elements, I think, of gender and sexuality and everything and anything in between.
You know, I'm going to get into the beginning of your story, your background, your life, where you were born, where you come from. But just to help perhaps our audience understand the topic, androgynous, non-binary, sexy human rights, I find that people that live on the androgynous line between male and female, being non-binary, when you don't claim either male or female, it's so hard to actually be sexy and sexual because you're so kind of trying, perhaps not everybody, just what I've noticed, you are perhaps trying to be neutral. You are trying to kind of, because both sexes are so hypersexualized. If you're masculine, you must exhibit this sexy masculinity. If you're feminine, you must exhibit this sexy femininity. So how does one exhibit sexiness when they are androgynous, when they're in the middle, when they are non-binary? And do we have a right to be sexy when we are choosing to kind of like just be neutral sexually, right? And when I met you, I was like, gosh, this guy, this human being, this them there is actually quite sexy. That's what I thought when I saw you. I was like, how are they doing it? They're not falling into either. I can't tell that they're being sexy masculinely. I can't tell if they're being sexy. So I was like, I'm spilling it right now that I was like, you know what, maybe you can teach us a thing or two about that. And our human rights is always based on this struggle to kind of like claim one gender or the other, or claim our, you know, it's always like deep in the trenches. I was like, guys, can we just be sexy, please? Right. So it's the undercurrent of what's going on, you know. So anyway, tell us about yourself. You're born in Tanzania. What was your life and childhood like? Because right now you're in the bigger city. You are in Cape Town. How did you move from East London to Cape Town? What's your life been like?
Actually, I am still in East London. My life path number is number 6, and it's really close to family and friends. And so I think I'm a very rooted human being. I come from a very traditional family, African spirituality. And although I had a Model C, if that's what they call it, education, I couldn't help but connect my being, myself, to the traditional system of my family, you know, and where I come from, because my body, my blood, comprises of so much that has been before, and so much I can see or interpret from the people that have raised me, from the people that are around me that I call family. And so it was essential for me to, in order to advance and progress, to make a great acknowledgement of where I come from and who I am in that space, what my contribution is to that space, and then understand that my transcendence moves from there, I guess. So I grew up in Tanzania. I thought it was the second biggest township in South Africa. Google tells me I'm wrong. I think there's Tembisa and others. So it's quite a big township in East London, predominantly, I think, constructed to host some of the laborers when the industrial areas in East London were constructed. And so very rooted, I guess, in the separatism of apartheid, but quite communal, I think, in the way I understood it, and I got brought up in that space. And yeah, I advanced to studying at Fort Hare, and then I went to UKZN afterwards, and I've been working with various organizations. There's an Eastern Cape LGBTI organization that we co-founded with Zamanguni, Zimela, with Benny was there, who yeah, there's a lot of people that I don't want to cut out, but yes, we engaged in kind of the Gail Kirchman part of the movement, kind of initiating in the Eastern Cape, and then moved to Gay and Lesbian Network, which is now Utingo Network, and currently I am working at Gender Dynamics. So yeah, I think that was somewhat of a progression to where I am, and just to advance some of the ideologies I believe in when it comes to gender expression and diversity.
Okay. Wow, you've done quite a bit, hey? And sometimes the smaller towns, especially in the Eastern Cape, they get left behind with some of these progressive talks. So it's probably like, you're keeping, like, you are one of the innovators and you're one of the people there. We should probably link up. I should probably come over there. So now tell me.
Maybe you should. Yeah.
I would love
it's a great
to.
scene. Great scene. East London is a beautiful scene.
I was born there, hey?
And really?
Yeah, I'm Tanzania.
No wonder we get along. I feel like
I was born in Sicily. I'm a Kiwane, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me ask you, what is your gender identity and what is your gender expression? Because people kind of just get stuck on sexual orientation and they think that's all you need to decide on. So how do you identify? So
my gender identity, I consider myself gender non-conforming.
Yeah.
And that's how the extension of which is my pronouns they and them. And then my expression is fluid, gender fluid. So I would vary in terms of expression to the various degrees of masculinity, various degrees of femininity, neither or both. And I think really growing up younger, I've always battled with the idea of being this body and feeling different, that this body in the way in which it is interpreted or seen doesn't fully encompass who I am, or is not fully received or interpreted in a way that acknowledges all of me. And so part of me needs to make peace with that people always have preconceived notions of who one is before, you even get a chance to speak or share yourself with them. But also understand that I'm so much more than just my body. And so that's my nonconformity. It's just being who I am, wherever, however, just being true to my identity. And you made a comment earlier about being sexy. And I'm just thinking, I think confidence for me, just having a sense of self-awareness, knowing who you are, and being fine with that, and being fine in where or how that's positioned in spaces, not reserving it, but just being, I think for me is the most sexy one can be,
It starts with yourself, right? It starts with yourself because where I was playing on the androgynous line, I have to tell you, I would always observe how different people receive me. Some people actually want to tell me that I'm more attracted to you when you're more masculine, as if like now if now I'm going to hook up with that person, they are already predetermining what they find attractive. And if I do anything else, they're already telling me they won't find that attractive. And then it's always difficult to, maybe if you are dating, to find somebody that embraces both, because people want to like treat you, when you're more feminine, they want to treat you more feminine. And if you're more masculine, they want to treat you more masculine. And they can't reconcile the two, that, listen, however way you see me, so how are you finding that? Do you find that people treat you differently based on how you express? Are people understanding? And do you want to be treated differently depending on how you express?
I mean, listen, society from the get-go determines how we should act based on our gender from birth. Even prenatal, you get, the kind of gender reveal parties, and that's like your people setting kind of the premise of your life just before you even see the face of the earth. And so it's hard to run away from those expectations, right? It's hard to run away from people's ideals of how they see us and what they think or how they think will contribute to interactions with them, how we'll receive them, how we'll make them feel, that's so gendered. That's so gendered in the way in which we understand it. And so I think I'm still on a journey to reconcile myself. As I've grown, I don't want to reveal my age, but as I've grown, I think connecting with people who know who I am, who are comfortable with the fact that my gender is not static, because their own genders are not static. I mean, rarely do we find, one who's just 100% masculine and never expresses, even with their own self, because I feel like masculinity or femininity or gendered expression is a human expression that anyone can carry, but we categorize it in either masculine or, this side of the spectrum, or feminine, this side of the spectrum. But it's actually a variation of emotions that can collide and collude in however ways and various times, various forms. And so I think learning that that's okay, being in the spaces where I feel like people understand that, or at least are an open space to receive it, being with partners who understand it, or at least an open spaces to receive it, allows a bit more flexibility for both of us, because friends, family, partners also express themselves in ways that don't or aren't delimited by their own genders or their own presumed genders or expected genders. They allow their emotions, they allow their actions to be of a human, to be childlike, to be fully encompassing of who they are. And so I think it's a difficult having to reconcile with every stranger, but I'm lucky that I don't think I have to just reconcile with every stranger, but the most important people in my life who I feel already are connected to my being outside of gender.
So now, this could still be a very highbrow topic for some people watching, because people will still be asking, what is non-binary? Like, what is that? What is androgynous? So can you please, according to you, tell us what is androgynous?
So I think androgyny or being androgynous is expressing yourself in a way that is, let's say, neither feminine or masculine, or maybe ambiguous of either, So you'd find people, who look androgynous. Others would ask, is that a girl or is that a boy? Your look is just, it's neutral, if ever there was such a word. And that's androgyny for me. And non-binary, I guess, is not sticking to either one side of the spectrum or the other. When we consider a spectrum, we say it's a kind of variation of possibilities. and one side says there's one, and that means there's another, and when we say spectrum, we must consider that there's a whole range of things or identities in between. And so, non-binary would just say, I don't have to be on the far end of either of the identities in the spectrum, but just be myself and express myself outside of those binaries. I hope I answered that question.
Yes, because then the next question I was going to ask you, what is the difference between binary and non-binary? And you're saying it's one end of the spectrum.
So binary
again, yeah, please.
Yes, yeah. So a binary would be, when we do coding, maybe in some maths earlier in the high school years, you learn about binary systems. It's 1 or 0. So like there's two options. And in our binary system, in line with the gender expressions or gender identities, traditionally, because a colonial tradition or colonial understanding of it, there's either male or female. And on top of that, there's either masculine or feminine, right? And countless experiences and expressions of people all over the world prove that that's not how the world is entirely. It's not just one or the other, but there's a whole variant, a whole entire people who express themselves or identify quite different from that binary. Yeah. So that's what it is. Binary, and then non-binary would be just moving or flowing.
Everyone or in between who's not stuck on that fixed one gender, on that fixed one femininity or masculinity. So then that leads us to fluid. What is fluid then?
Well, fluid is then entertaining the possibility of moving from one to the other. And again, this concept for me, gender needs work. And as activists, I think we still need to do a lot of work. We need to debunk the binary first, and then debunk gender. What is gender? Can we say crying is a gendered expression, right? Or fighting is a gendered expression, what is gender?
Crying and fighting is got a gender that it's associated with. So when you're saying debunk, you're saying gender must fall.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I'm trying to allude to, there's a whole human experience that we forfeit because we are so stuck in what gender should be and how we should be and what's expected, and we just miss out on so much. Do men know the freedom one feels wearing a dress? Can you understand just everything, just feeling, especially on a hot day, and you just feel comfortable in the soft cotton, and I mean, even the way in which they make clothes, the one gender has to have a rigid, bland colored kind of form of dress style, and that's considered manly. But the other, there's soft fabrics, there's multicolors, there's options, and that's feminine. And why? Why? Do we ever ask ourselves why? And if we do look at it, there's a whole history. Again, colonization has an input of how we're taught to think about gender and how we're taught to express gender, and limit ourselves now in our possibilities.
This is you and me talking. We know we don't want to be stuck in our genders and stuck in the confines of whatever gender you are born as and having to perform whatever that gender is, right? But there are people who don't feel like they're stuck. They feel like that identity and that gender, it defines them completely, because I'm a man and I will show you with my everything that I do that is like a man. I will show you that I'm a married man, I'm a father, I'm heterosexual, I'm strong, I am brave, and that defines me, you know. And women as well, they'll be proud of, look, I'm a married woman, I'm a mother. I think this happens mostly when people are married. When we're still single, I think maybe we have a little bit more leeway to kind of like decide, because we're not trying to force somebody who is proud of their binary gender to kind of now destabilize and go like, no, now gender must fall. How can I still be a mother and a woman if gender is going to die? What have you got to say to that?
I'd love to pose that question to you. Since this is a conversation.
You know why I'm asking you? I'm asking you because as somebody born in a female body, hey, and I went to the bank the one time, and I get asked all the time, are you Miss, are you Mrs., are you Ms.? And men never get asked that question. It really frustrates me that we are treated differently as sexes, as genders. Ne? That somebody in a female body will be asked, are you married or not? Because I need to know what prefix to put in front of your name. And that angered me actually. And when I found out the prefix MX, that it's for everybody, male, female, married or unmarried, that's what I insist on. And if you can't give me that according to whatever you're selling me in your company, then I'll take on another prefix. I'll not, what have you else have you got there? Reverend? I'll take
Reverend.
I take Reverend, Sana, because that's also gender neutral. You don't know, because you know. So I definitely know that in a cis-normative heterosexual society, if somebody is proud of their cisgender heterosexuality, they are surprised at a question like, "Oh, ma'am, are you?" Or, "Oh, I'm sorry, what do I call you? Are you male or female?" There are people who are used to visibly being seen as a particular gender, and the only way to normalize LGBTI lives, trans lives in a cis-normative world is for all of us to be asked the same question. As queer bodies, we are asked all the time, what's your gender? What's your sexual orientation? What's your sex? Why is it only restricted to one small part of the community? How are we going to equalize if only a small percentage of people are asked that question? So when I say that, I will come with this, I will be confronted with this, like, but you can see, you can even see. So why are you asking me that? And I'm like going, but I'm not asking you that to challenge what you are, but just like we are proud of who we are when we gender express fluid or gender bend, it shouldn't be an insult to ask you the very same question. So I was just wondering if you've come across that, like, why are you going to be so protective and defensive of your cisgenderness when we have to explain our non-cisgenderness all the time, you know? And I was just wondering, is there something that I'm missing that, like, why is that normal? And we have to be explaining ourselves to one area of society that is calling themselves normal. Yeah. I don't know if there was a question in there.
I guess, I mean, I think we have a workshop that we do at Gender Dynamics for this gender affirming healthcare. And one of the questions that facilitators ask is, do you remember the first time you were assigned a gender or you were told to act in a particular way in order to enforce, you know, your gender? And a lot of participants, you know, have to recall moments in their lives in the early youth where they were told that because you are a girl or because you're a boy, you have to act a certain way. And that was the prescript that they had to follow. That's a norm that they had to assume in order to be validated, in order to be valued, right? And affirmed as a human being. Otherwise, they'll be shamed, otherwise they'll be ostracized. And so growing with that in mind, one negates, right? Maybe one forfeits, you know, the other alternatives of the expression, because this is what is granted as a positive identity. This is what is promoted. And so they move into that, up that trajectory. And then unfortunately, once they occupy certain rights or privilege, they don't want to forfeit that privilege. It's difficult for any of us, I think, to forfeit privilege. Yeah.
It's your rite of passage into adulthood, into kind of graduating into like being taken seriously as a person, that you've expressed this gender so well that if anybody questions it, they're destabilizing your whole identity. So now that's what we kind of like, we're cracking that beautiful kind of staircase that they graduated into. Oh, okay. So
I mean, you find also,
you want somebody to
a lot
ask
of
you,
women
why are you proud of? Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Sorry, I feel like my connection is a bit wonky here.
No, we were just speaking at the same time because you were answering my question. Why are cisgender people so proud to be cisgender that when they are asked if they're cisgender, why is that cause for such a defense? You know, and you've just explained that society has normalized it into something that becomes a big part of how you see yourself, and you've never questioned it because it was something that you had to do so well, you know? Yeah, that's
and you've mastered as time goes by. You've mastered, and you as an adult are almost responsible to educate the next generation. So as you are a mother or a father, you know, younger boys or girls or people look up to you to model what it means to be a girl, a woman, a feminine, a man, you know, so it ends up being this repetitive cycle of I grew up assimilating, and then when I have acquired the standard, it's my duty to educate or, you know, assist the rest of the society to grow into these standards. And because it's safe, right? If we know this is a man and this is a woman, we have an idea of what to expect, how to navigate this space, how to deal with romantic engagements, how to deal with certain social roles, you know, and it seems safe, but life is just too vast for such a safety. And each day we encounter, again, variance and difference and contentions and tensions and, you know, gender-based violence and women empowerment and, you know, the things that then test this binary or this understanding of a static type of gender. And so, you know, people protect this gender because they think, you know, they're doing themselves a favor. But in fact, you know, they themselves are still, you know, there's still a child. The child still wants to express the entire being. That always speaks back to how that expression should look like in you know, a gendered identity.
That is why the parents are so afraid when maybe the child doesn't choose a clear gender that speaks to how they had planned for their child when they were told that the child is a boy. That is why they're so afraid, because that's the only thing that they know. Okay, no, I get it.
The only thing that they know
work is to
and also the only thing that they know, but also the only thing that they feel is safe. Because you can express some type of gender nonconformity sometimes in the house, but how others interpret that and how it positions you in proximity to violence is a different concern that some parents have. Exactly. You know, that they don't want their child to be marginalized, excluded from opportunities, bullied, and so rather stick to the script. Yes. So that you can at least have a guaranteed you know, future, as opposed to being transgressive and then experiencing all this rejection and violence. You know, so in the flip side, they think that that might be the safer option, as opposed to having a particular identity that's not really fixed.
So then this is part then of the education that we're offering, right? Then this is part of the progress and the, the next level of what we want to offer. Uba, let's not be so afraid of something fixed. Let's not be so afraid of something static and binary. Let us feel safe in something that's fluid, right? That's ever changing. So back to sexiness. Is it important to be sexy as a non-binary or an androgynous person? And can one be sexy and still not identify fixed as, binary? What does that sexiness look like?
I love that question. Particularly because I haven't really thought about it myself, and maybe expressed it, but I feel like
expressed it.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying, right? I think that the earlier submission of, if you're confident in yourself, if you're able to, flirt with yourself in the mirror and think, damn, I still got this, and, popping, for me, that is what brings about the sexiness. It's not necessarily how short your dress is. It's not necessarily how curved your biceps are, or how, big or, flirtatious your eyes can be, I feel like it's just being comfortable in your skin, and being able to allow that radiance in yourself to shine, regardless of how people interpret, the way in which you look. And this is not always easy. A lot of us transgender, non-conforming, gender non-binary, binary people experience a lot of body dysphoria. That people see our bodies a particular way and they treat us in a way that is completely opposite or far removed from who we are. And so that makes us hate our bodies, or makes us feel like we'd rather, not be here, or, change completely, because, this social interaction is doing so much injustice to who we are. So it's very difficult to feel sexy, in a body that you feel you are not recognized in, or you're not appreciated or seen.
And
but I think
I'm asking you this question. Yeah. I'm asking you this question because I sometimes notice that, especially when you're perhaps first coming out as non-binary, or you're first coming out as androgynous, you are perhaps trying to hide your sexual magnetism. You are trying to not exude too much sexual energy. You kind of want to like be so neutral that like you're not seen as male or female, that like people can't find you sexy because they can't tell what sex you are. So that's why I was asking the question, because I rarely see gender non-conforming people try and perform sexiness or express sexiness, because it will either come from my experience of just being afraid of being in a female body, because I was afraid of looking too desirable, looking too sexy, because I was afraid of like, I don't want to be targeted for rape. So when I retreated into non-conformity, I was like, just see a person, please don't see a woman, because I don't want to be seen sexually. So that's why I'm trying to kind of affirm the sexiness. But even if we are here in this middle ground, in this neutral ground, how do we express our sexiness? And that's what you're saying. Because if you're confident, just like we've seen throughout the times of really big women coming into their own, reclaiming their sexiness, when in the past it was a slim-figured person's place to be sexy. And different.
Again, that's a Western interpretation, right? Because we as Africans have always imbued the curvaceous, kind of big-figured type of body as a body that's sexy, right? So the lens, I think, is also quite important. Sorry to cut you there.
No problem.
Nosana.
No, that's all I was saying, because I know where my androgyny comes from. It comes from the fear of being seen as too sexual. But when I met you, and I was like, you know what, because as people in any body, now let's look at a male body. I've noticed that maybe you be maybe a feminine gay man out there, and you'll be trying to display sexiness. And I've noticed that the only way to display sexiness as a feminine gay man is to take on some feminine makeup, clothes and weave, and you'll be displaying a feminine sexiness, And if maybe you're a butch lesbian and you're trying to be sexy, you will take on some masculine sexiness. And that's why I keep on saying to you that when I first saw you, I was like, wow, this is really androgynous sexiness I'm seeing here. Don't want to carry on too much about that. Next question. But you know what I'm talking about, right? Or am I making you blush right now?
Yeah. Am I? I should put my camera off.
No, don't worry about it. So now I've made some examples in there. I've seen different boys in heels be sexy, Now they're not taking on a gay man sexiness. If now boys in heels are going to be in heels, there's already like a pop culture expression that's happening, right? So tell us more about this culture, the unisex style, who is trending. Are there any examples of androgyny that is sexy out there, whether that's fashion or even fashion designers or people wearing, we don't even have a unisex department, but you're up to date. Tell us what's trending out there.
Nosana, I'm not up to date. I'm analog. I am off the grid in the farmlands, working on my meal type youth. So I think I do have some type of idea. I think I draw a lot from Grace Jones.
Oh,
Grace
yeah.
Jones to me was one of the most beautiful women, if that's how they identified, I think. And because a lot of people said when I was younger I looked like her, I felt like, this is telling, I look like this icon really just blew our minds, effed up our minds, in terms of how they express, what they do, and just, their voice, Grace was just amazing, exuding sexuality, even if they don't wear, the ultra feminine or the ultra masculine. And for me, that was the first kind of instance of what it means to be sexy without having to do a lot,
And who came after Grace Jones for me was Skin from Skunk and Nancy. I thought Skin was super sexy. Skin from Skunk and Nancy. Yeah. And it obviously always works out better for you if you're slimmer, because you can pass easier as,
Yeah.
And and there's often the oldies. I'm not up to date as well. That's why I'm asking you. I definitely know that in Japan, there's a lot more youth culture, which I can't tell you now. I'll have to Google it. When I talk to young people or people coming from abroad, they'll be like, hey, my kids are listening to some band from Japan. And from my time, I can think of Boy George. I thought Boy George was ahead of his time with his androgynous looks, and it was over the top, you know what I mean?
Prince back then as well.
Prince,
yeah,
right? Prince. But yeah.
Yeah, I think now there's Janae Monair. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that.
I'm not sure. I'll have
I think she was in Antebellum. And I think her style is quite nice and unisex. Harry Styles.
People must help us here. The people must help us and tell us who's out.
Yes, please.
Please, guys, if you're listening and you feel we're struggling.
Represented a lot of who I think I'd love to be.
Who's
because
this?
They wear a dress. Harry Styles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They wear a dress and it's unapologetic. It's just like take it or leave it, girl. Like I just love that, even when they don't shave and it's just like, in a beautiful dress, and the juxtaposition is like, wow, and I think the more you see it, the more you get used to it. You're just like, okay, I
Yes.
like it. I like it,
And you know what I'm
Yeah.
loving, which is also breaking the rules? I'm loving trans women who aren't shaving and who aren't tucking. I can't name them, but you pop it into it sometimes. Sometimes it's on Drag Race, and it's just this thing, because even that kind of like transgender living, trans woman beauty, the drag culture has always been be the most elegant feminine you can be, So I love those people that are breaking the rules, not tucking, not shaving, and saying, hey, because I find that also to be very androgynous. I love that, right? And both of us now, we've got very few kind of examples, because I was going to ask, like, who are the celebs, that are kind of demystifying this look. Like, I think, wasn't it Will Smith's son who at some point was like wearing skirts?
I was thinking about that. There's Willow. Willow is quite good, and Jaden.
Yeah.
Both of them, I think, are quite androgynous. I think they're beautiful people, like just amazing. I'm not sure what was happening with. Is it Jaden, the young man? I'm not sure what is happening with him, or a young person, in case that they don't identify as a man.
Yeah.
But I think they went into a kind of slip, and I do realize a lot of assigned male at birth people find a lot of tension in accepting and embracing their femininity, because it's considered a sign of weakness, and they find it difficult to integrate. While a lot of assigned female at birth, you already wear pants. Pants are part of what you can do. You can wear a pantsuit, and still pass as a woman. So there's a little less resistance for assigned female at birth people in their unisex or non-conformity than assigned male at birth. And I think that's something we really need to work with.
We need to work on that. We need to work on that. It's like that amazing photograph of Iggy Pop in that dress and heels. And I think the comment is, why is it that, like, what is, I must find it, but there is this fantastic picture of Iggy Pop in like a slim kind of tight dress and heels, and his comment is that, why do you want to disrespect a woman, and also disrespect a man like this? It's just not safe, and that's why we have these marches for men to wear heels, to wear lipstick, because that's also a fight that has to kind of reach its peak and be like, guys, let's wear our lipstick and heels and not be less than men because of that, right?
And I guess, this really disrupts gender and what you perceive as sexy, because if men can do that, that means you as a woman can, without feeling like you will be objectified or you're hypersexual.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it disrupts the gender and also the sexual expectations. Also want to note David Tlale. David Tlale is great, right? Yes. In terms of androgyny. Let's say that. And Somizi has their show up spaces.
Yeah, the show-stopping, flamboyant look.
Yeah. But I was going to say there are challenges in schools, like these TikTok, Facebook challenges, where boys wear tunics, wear uniform skirts, and they look amazing.
The
and
boys wear the school uniform, the tunic, the girls.
Yes, the boys wear
fantastic. I haven't seen
tunics. Yeah, I've seen a few of those, and they look amazing, and they feel confident. And obviously, it's a light-hearted moment for some. Yeah. But really, it breaks the kind of stigma, I think, that if you wear a dress, you're some type of person. You either lesser of a human, or you ought to be objectified. Or you want to be, sexually attractive, or however we think about these things. So I really, really enjoyed those challenges, seeing that from young boys and, them expressing themselves, and maybe some of them really wanted to always try to wear a dress, but never had the chance.
Yeah, there was no setup for them to do it safely.
Yes.
And I like how
a safe setup.
Because now you're saying, right now, women in their heels, in their short skirts, in their just plain or not so plain feminine expression, which is hypersexualized, because now men will be like, oh, you wanted that. If you were violated, you were asking for it because of how you were dressed in your heels and whatever. So now you're saying the disruption is that if men start wearing heels and dresses and makeup, what will be the excuse now for the rapist? Because it will be a standard, acceptable way of dressing, because now we can be able to remove that. Actually, this is like an acceptable dress code. Everyone can wear these heels and these short skirts, and you can't blame it for anything. So let's invite like heterosexual cisgender men to kind of assist in this GBV thing and say, we need you straight guys. We need you in heels and tight skirts for this mission, right?
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
We need them.
I like that as a normalizing, something that we can visually see so that it can demystify, femininity, in a way in which we understand it as over-sexual. But we also need to understand that sexual violence is a power dynamic, It's you being able to assert yourself over another body, determine, the life or the movements of that particular body. And so you'd find, the kind of mutilation and the gross sexual violence of lesbian women who would be wearing, butch clothes, as a corrective way in which men think they should implement themselves, implement the rights to classify gender and enforce gender onto other bodies. So it's a power trip.
So you're adding
rape, violence.
What you're adding is the part that now, yes, we are trying to say, leave women in short skirts and heels alone and don't rape them. But now, here are lesbians who are fully covered being raped because they are not being feminine enough according to what is expected. Like, oh, you don't know that you're a woman. You're dressing like this. We'll show you, we'll rape you. And then, of course, there'll be cisgender men who'll be like, look, that's only done by gay men. Don't ask me to put on heels. And I'm still trying to assert that I'm a heterosexual man. I'm not trying to confuse the narrative here. So these are all the things, because now we are putting ourselves in these boxes. Uba, I dress like this because I express like this, because I identify like this, because my sexual orientation is this. And I'm going to do that. And I can't jump into another box. That's what also the problem is, you see.
It's a fallacy. All these boxes are a fallacy, really. It's like you think you're in a box and you want to abide by the rules, but the rules aren't set in stone, they aren't written down. It's a matter of what my community or immediate community or maybe my idealized society thinks, about these things. But there's so many variations of how men express themselves.
It's made up. It's made up. It's a construct that we've just bought into. And it's mostly a westernized construct of what we've bought into, because if you look back at African cultures, the dresses and the makeup was worn very largely by men. And now we're just taking on new made up boxes, right? Hold on. I think we're going to get serious now. How is your gender separate or connected to your sexuality? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes, I think I do.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain that to our viewers?
No, I'd like to actually understand how you see what I mean. And then maybe,
Okay.
yeah. And what, because this thing could have multiple meanings. I don't want to restrict you. Yeah.
So gender and sexuality, in the way in which we understand it in society, are very closely linked, right? The way in which you are gendered, particularly into your teenage years, is often morphed to accommodate your sexual desires, or what is considered to be sexually acceptable. You know, as a woman, you should act a certain way in order to be approached or seen by men, or able to find a husband. You know, and men should be more assertive. You know, so gender is very closely linked. And so I'm not exempt in that I grew up in that system too, right? Where I had to understand gender close to sexuality. And I'll be honest, I will be honest, that because I navigate the space with so many identities, you know, feminine identities, masculine, non-binary, then how I express my gender often than not attracts certain outcomes, you know, or you know, maybe if I have certain intentions, then I understand that, you know, a particular gender expression might be ideal in a particular situation. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised where I'm acting, not acting, but performing or expressing a particular gender, and what I'm drawn or what's drawn to me is completely different than what I expect. And so it's because as people, we're multi-dimensional, you know. Feminine people love feminine people, masculine people can love masculine, masculine to non-binary, non-binary to non-binary, you know. And so you expect something and you might, you know, be pleasantly surprised, you know. So I've learned to, again, just understand my sexuality as fluid. My gender is also fluid, and to allow that to navigate my space for me, to position me in a way in which, you know, it wants to, you know, my givenness to the world and how the world receives me. It happens where it happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will demystify your answer by saying how gender and sexuality can be separate or connected, ne? Is that we know right now that a person can be transgender and be a trans woman, but still be perhaps lesbian or bisexual. So now that means there's a disconnection or a separation, because now it will be expected for somebody to be a trans woman, be attracted to men, because everybody's prescribed and pre-prescribed a norm. Uba, you are trying to be a woman, so you must be trying to be with a man. So now that's where the separation and the connection can be. That will be surprised if a trans woman is a lesbian and we happen to know that, oh, but now the genitals are opposite sex genitals. Are we still in a same-sex relationship? Yes, you are still in a same-sex relationship because you both identify as women. What you guys are doing in the bedroom is none of our concern, right? So that is also something that we as the outside community could view perhaps non-binary and trans people and be having these type of expectations. Uba, no, but we think you're supposed to act like that because we see that you are acting like this. So we are pre-prescribing what we predict from you, you know? So that's actually so important for us not to kind of be out here trying to be all surprised when things like this are happening. And before I forget, it does happen, right? That perhaps you've been a butch lesbian, perhaps your entire 20s, you've been lesbianing it up, you've been a bit masculine, and then you decide, actually, I am male. My brain tells me this. I'm going to go on hormone replacement therapy. I'm going to take some gender affirming treatment. and I'm going to start looking like the man that I feel inside. And then you are going to think that, okay, I'm still going to date women, but now I'm going to be, the man really now. But then sometimes those trans men become gay and they're attracted to men. And that's also like a stay away topic that sometimes we don't want to go into, right? Because now
let's do it. Let's do it. Let's go right into it.
Because people be like, oh, but then you weren't liking men just now. Now you are a man and now you do, Do you know a little bit around like what is the social or the psychological science around how that happens? Or is it just you were gay once, you go be gay again? Okay.
I think one thing my rector once said, because she's celibate and she's been celibate for quite a number of years, is that the reason for that is that you can't divorce sex from power. Sexual relationships in themselves are imbued with power, power relations, negotiating power, power over, power under, power with, and so sometimes as particular bodies, we find it difficult to navigate our power in relations based on how our bodies are situated, and so, maybe perceived a situation or actually how we feel about that situation. And so I think transitioning allows us to open up a bit of possibility to what it might look like. For example, if I was a assigned male at birth, dating men, and then I become a woman. I become a trans woman, or I express myself as a trans woman. Dating women will not then mean that I am cis, hetero, and straight, which will then obviously have silenced or erased the whole entire being of my being different or my being, expressive of everything outside of that binary, right? It will be easier for me to express it because, that's what I actually say that I've said to myself when I was younger, that if ever I were a trans a woman, or if ever I had a chance to be a woman, I would date women. I would date women,
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, no, women are beautiful. Women are like, I feel, and I've connected with women more than I've ever connected with men, right? But there's a power thing. I feel that I will be enforcing, if I'm with a woman, that I need to enforce by being with a man because of my own politics, And so I wouldn't have that need, I think, if I were with the woman and being a woman myself. I wouldn't have a need, or I wouldn't feel like there's a power. Of course, again, power will be negotiated, but I feel it would be more on even ground, as opposed to how the hetero kind of normative lens looks at gendered relations.
Oh, I love it. I remember when I first came across pegging.
Very complex.
And my friend was pegging her boyfriend, right? I was so shocked. Oh, you are pegging, you are really dominating. It's a power thing, like you say. But I don't want to get into pegging. What I want to ask you, the X, when we spell woman with an X, I've come across some politics around that X that I will spell woman with an X and I'm thinking I'm being all inclusive. I'm including previously excluded women. But then there are some women, trans women, particularly sometimes you say, remove that X, we are women now. Why do you still want to exclude us with that X by putting an X, by even respelling to include us? If you're really going to include us, take away that X. And then some people say, bring that X to include. What do you think is the safe thing to do with the woman with an X now? Are you still there? Ooh. we're not sure if we are still here. We are going to wait for Savuka to come back to us. The question is, spelling woman with an X, does it include or does it exclude? Because now it highlights that these women were not necessarily born women or born female. Now we're putting an X and we're thinking that, oh, we're including trans women, but maybe we are excluding. Hopefully Savuka comes back soon. What are some of the comments that we have here today? Be the change, Casper is saying. Roxy is saying super. Felicita is dancing to our conversation. And Savuka is back. You're back. Welcome back, Savuka.
Hi, colleagues.
No problem.
So sorry
Welcome
about
back.
that. I think my internet connection was a bit wonky.
No worries. I'm not sure if you heard my previous question about the.
I heard pegging, and then I think I lost you there.
No, the pegging was a prelude to my question. I was saying, when you were talking about sex and power and how there's different powers that are expressed within same-sex relationships because of who needs to dominate and who has the power. And I explained that when I first came across my first female friend who was pegging her boyfriend, that was the first example of when I was like, wow, so women can have the power in a relationship, because pegging is a perfect example of dominating a man sexually, right? Yeah. But then I was remembering that sometimes spelling woman with an X, there's contention around that. Some people would be like, spelling woman with an X, we are being politically correct. We're including all women, including trans, non-binary, previously excluded women, especially in the political feminist space, whereby feminism was very much a white female conversation and excluded women, Black women. So what do you think when trans women and non-binary people say, we are women, we don't need an X to be included? Do you agree with the X, or what do you think?
So I think the X for me works. I think it's people taking their own agency, making their own decisions. You know, language in itself should evolve, you know, to accommodate the politics of the time. And identity is quite crucial to language. You know, language is crucial to identity. And so if I feel like a woman with an E is a reiteration of the subhumanness of you know, the perceived subhumanness of the kind of women identity and expression, because that's how society is, right? Men has been seen as a primary, and women are seen as an extract from the rib of that primary. And so women with an X is a complete debunking and kind of unleashing a whole potentiality of this particular group of people who have experienced a lot of marginalization, a lot of kind of being reminded to be submissive, treated as lessers, you know, based on a gendered expression. And for me, it's just taking power back. For me, is one of the best things one can do as a growing adult, as a non-conforming person in spaces that require you to conform. Just, you know, being able to say, I'm here and I occupy matter. I've got energy in me that is transferred into different spaces, and I matter. And so I'm not gonna dim my shine for anyone's expectations, and I'm gonna live my truth, you know, and yeah, just take up space.
Absolutely, right?
Mm.
Because, speaking deeper into gender diverse minorities again, if we are living non-binary, we're living androgynous, we know that our first human right is just to be allowed to express and to identify in this unknown area of non-male, non-female. But are there other human rights that we need to understand and to just know that these human rights are just overlooked for gender minorities? Yeah.
I think the first for me is the right to life. You have a right to life, to live, and how you live your life might be completely different to how I live my life. And I need to have the space to determine what that feels like, or what that is. And that also links to the right to self-determination.
Yeah.
Right? Because I am the one who solely paves that life, of course, in conjunction with, the community, society, but I'm the one who walks that path, and I therefore should choose my steps as I see fit and according. So I determine who I am, how I am in this life, equality, to be treated like any other human being, right? Because that's kind of the basis, I think, for me, that all LGBTI people should learn that they are humans first and foremost, and no rights that a cis heteronormative person has should be exempt from being enjoyed by LGBTI plus people. And so that equality for me is so important. Dignity as well.
Absolutely.
Being respected where you are, being allowed to engage in forms of progressing that dignity. And that includes affirming your gender, right?
Yes.
And being affirmed.
Yes.
And being affirmed.
We're getting to that. Let's get into that immediately, please. Because we all understand what's in the Constitution, and we can preach it, but it's not always going to be exercised or accessed, right? But when we're talking about human rights that we fight for the queer community, the transgender community have got a harder fight to fight. We're fighting for the right to access HRT, surgery, gender market changes, and the institutional barriers that just prevent us from just exercising our human rights to all these things. Where are we in this fight with all these examples that I've listed? HRT in the Department of Health, gender market changes in the Department of Home Affairs, surgery in academic hospitals, surgery with our medical aid, all this stuff.
That's a packed question, so I'll try to give a synopsis of sorts.
Yes, please.
With HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy, for those who don't know, trans and gender diverse people use hormone replacement therapy to affirm their gender, and that hormone replacement therapy advances certain changes in body, in expression to some degree, that assist you to align to the gender in which you feel most identifies who you are. And so we find a lot of state hospitals who can provide hormones aren't really fully aware of trans rights to access hormones, and have little provision for that. A lot of the state hospitals, and you find a very few handful in maybe the major cities that can administer HRT. And then an administration of HRT would need a psychologist either being present in the hospital, or you having to see an external psychologist, and then having an endocrinologist in some spaces, who can then advise as to or which hormones to take at what intervals or at what doses. And so part of our, I think, championing or advocacy is to try and get, number one, the hormones prescribed in the primary medical list, essential medical list, and also get them into primary healthcare, right? So that, I can come into a clinic and say, what, I need hormone replacement therapy, and have a doctor who will be on site, monitor my bloods, and then provide hormone replacement therapy, because they'll be educated or well kind of have knowledge enough to be able to assist me with that competent service. Because you do get general practitioners around the country who are able to provide hormone replacement therapy. So we are somewhat one foot in the door, I think, with some states being quite progressive, some states needing a bit of a push, and perhaps the guidelines that Southern African HIV clinicians gender affirming healthcare guidelines, which was produced last year by a group of activists and medical professionals, that if we can get that supported by the Department of Health, adopted, and have that perhaps enrolled or prescribed for particular or healthcare systems in South Africa, I think that would be a start, to make sure that we are in unison, we have some sort of understanding, and people have some thing to fall back on if ever they have questions as to how to treat their clients for gender affirming healthcare. So that's it with hormone replacement healthcare. You do get some medical aids who do provide HRT, and that's really a few. But generally, I think you get the elites. I know with one particular, I don't know if I can mention, Discovery has a very high kind of paying high classified with the higher brackets medical aid, and they have rolled out some trials to see if they can offer gender affirming healthcare to those particular patients. And obviously that's a bit exclusive because you have to be financially able and competent to get that, right? So that's something that, again, we're still trying to speak to, finding ways to challenge that and have medical aid systems encompassing gender affirming healthcare as an essential part of one's healthcare.
Yeah.
When it comes to surgery, however, there's a long list. When I was younger, it was 25 years. I think it's still 25 years, if not a bit more. I need to verify this with the surgeons. But particularly during COVID, because
that's in Cape Town or countrywide, there's a 25-year long waiting list to access free gender affirming surgery.
So the gender affirming surgery I'm speaking about would be predominantly bottom surgery. And that bottom surgery, I think, will be predominantly for trans women, because trans, I don't think there's enough specialized, surgeons, I could be wrong, for trans men for bottom surgery. But the 25 to greater perhaps year list would be for bottom surgery.
For only trans women to get
particularly
bottom surgery. Right now, we don't know if there's even a list for bottom surgery for trans men too.
For trans men, yeah.
Access bottom surgery.
If there's any kind of qualified, well-trained surgeons for that yet. But we do get some trans men who are able to access a double mastectomy, meaning that there's a removal of the breast tissues, and you get this in various hospitals, and you don't necessarily need to list yourself as trans. to get that surgery done. That's a bit less in terms of waiting time.
Yeah.
Normally, then the trans women breast augmentation is somewhat considered cosmetic.
Yeah.
Which then delays the access from the states and would require one to access that externally. In private, if they're not content with the growth of their own breast tissue.
And what's the success rate? Because I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I understand there's a better success rate at bottom surgery for trans women for it to be a successful surgery. Ne? But I understand there's a very high failure rate for bottom surgery for trans men to get there.
So hence I said that there might be a dearth, a need for more qualified, well-trained surgeons who can perform a bottom surgery, phalloplasties, etc., for trans men, because it is a need. It is a need that trans men have in order to further affirm their identities and be able to comfortably stand in a stall, amongst other men and urinate, amongst other things that one can use your genitals for. And so I think, yes, definitely, the stories I've heard haven't been great in terms of bottom surgeries.
For trans men. Trans men are just kind of just keeping their frontal organs that they were assigned at birth as female, and because they're not called vaginas, frontal organs. Frontal organs, because there's just too much of a risk, right? They're just choosing to keep. But it would really be nice if we were hearing like more success stories in that department, because I know there's close to like a 69% failure rate, but it was a failure of a surgery. Yeah. Okay.
Actually quite sad. Yeah, it's really quite sad.
Because it's inaccessible right now. So now let's talk about Act 49 of 2003, the sexual, what is the proper description of that act?
Alteration of Sex Description and Sex Status Act.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Are we not being policed with this act? Are they not forcing us to get permission to identify as the gender we identify as and to have it corroborated by a medical psychologist? Do we have agency on our own, or are we being policed? How do you feel about this act? Is it working for us or working against us?
So this actually also speaks to the advances that we are making or trying to make within the provision of gender-affirming healthcare, that the necessity of having that access, having to then go through a psychologist first or some type of evaluation seems like a limitation, particularly because not everyone has access to psychologists, but also a pathologization of sorts, that is a pathology and it needs some type of medical intervention, mental, psychosocial intervention first, prior to one acknowledging, because people know their gender, their identities. I've known that I've always been gender non-conforming, whether sometimes I feel I'm more feminine, maybe sometimes I feel like I'm in between, but I've always known that there's a possibility, and I believe children also know that, and I believe adults know that at times. And so having that as a prerequisite sometimes is a limitation, and that not everyone has access to. So thinking about a person in Nduli or Elliot, who has to walk or drive kilometers to access state hospitals, how can they have easy access to a psychologist or medical profession in order to then affirm, their gender? And then having to have that letter move into a Home Affairs system which is not always efficient. People complain about waiting 2 years to get their gender marker changed. And imagine being pulled over by a traffic cop and you have to pull out a driver's license and it says female, and you have a beard, and so certain things, even travel sometimes, even the bank is a problem, having to have a different gender marker, and your appearance and your voice are completely different than those markers. So it is a sense, it does delay, I think, one's kind of actualization, if one could say. And that's why in the standard operating procedures that the civil societies suggested in terms of amendments, they also asked, would traditional healers be considered as medical professionals?
Yeah.
Because that might be in much more closer proximity for some people to say, here's a letter from my traditional healer, they acknowledge my gender identity, and so I would like to use this as a form of entrance into the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's basically bureaucratic, it's paperwork, it's red tape. There isn't, and it also depends on the official at Department of Home Affairs, how understanding they're going to be and how accepting they're going to be. Is it really just going to be accessed via paperwork? Because some people provide the paperwork, they provide their photographs, they provide the birth certificate, they provide their bodies sometimes and say, look at me. Are you seeing Peter or are you seeing Samantha right now? Because I'm Samantha, thank you for changing my name on my ID, but now I need my gender marker changed. Because now I'm seen as committing fraud, like you're saying, at the banks, at everywhere. So now when someone at Home Affairs is still delaying and denying you access to a gender marker change, is it still this whole business of there's the numbers of your ID that they're counting that you were male? Because we sometimes get this long description that the whole system of ID numbers needs to be changed. And then now what are you going to say if that's what they tell you?
You do need a new ID number after you change your gender marker, because of that the last 3 digits of our ID numbers are gendered, so in a spectrum of sorts, where now I'm not sure, I need to recheck whether it's 0 to 4, that's female, and I need to recheck that. So they are gendered, and so the whole system says that in order to then change a marker, that ID as well needs to change. So that's not the only issue. There's so much admin. After you meet the official, who might not understand your issues, who might not be sensitized enough for understanding or assisting a transgender person, you still have a lot of administration that application needs to go through before it gets to the officials up there, before that gets approved and then trickles down again. So it's just a system. It's a long system.
So basically, if I'm in Bloemfontein and I'm going to Home Affairs to change my gender marker, it still has to go to Pretoria.
Sorry, Nosana.
Sorry. So I'm saying, so if I'm in Bloemfontein, I'm changing my gender marker here. It's not something that the gender marker can be changed here in Bloemfontein. It has to go to national office in Pretoria. It's not like I can't, if I'm fighting them here in Bloemfontein, it's not going to work because they're still applying for the permission to change a gender marker, like in another National Department of Home Affairs. Is that what's happening?
So I'm losing connection here, but I'm not sure if I heard you. But you need to approach your kind of closest Department of Health, and then that application is processed there before it reaches the head office in Pretoria. And so there's a system in place where the papers are vetted, checked, and have to be sent back if they don't meet some process before it gets there, and then approved or denied, and then trickle
it can be denied.
It possibly can be denied if it doesn't meet certain standards.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, they check, and they can say that particularly maybe you know there's an issue with your paperwork, you know, or whatever. Yeah, they can deny it, and then you need to be sent back, and you can appeal if you know you see that there's an issue there. So it's a process. It's a long, tedious process that we're trying to get the Department of Home Affairs to kind of consolidate with us as a civil society. But that's a work in progress, you know. And also including gender nonconformity, so an uncategorized gender, which I think is a bit of a longer stretch or longer fight, but we're trying
to. Oh, you mean like the gender marker? We are still fighting to have a third sex inserted in the ID. That it's not just male, female. That we can have a third option. That will say what exactly?
Yes. Uncategorized, unspecified. Yeah, right. Or remove gender completely. Okay. Yeah. Why do we need to have our genders in
and to be uncategorized? You would either be intersex or transgender or gender non-conforming. And imagine trying to prove all those things also at Department of Home Affairs. Oh, that is shocking. Let's rather like... Yeah,
the red tape is quite exhausting to a lot of people who are trying to access the system. And so they really need a lot of patience and support. And we're also trying to get the standard operating procedures to include training for all departments of Home Affairs staff, so that they understand transgender diverse issues, that gender marker sometimes is the difference between life and death for some people. And that it's essential then to work with that, you know, and to humanize people and to engage them from the level of respect and making sure that they can realize their lives and live full lives, you know. And so those trainings, I think, are quite essential to sensitize the staff at Home Affairs.
Because we were just fighting now to get married as same-sex couples, and then the Civil Union Bill was enacted. It was passed, and now what I'm curious about, because we recently found out when we spoke to the commissioner, that act is passed. There isn't even a waiting period anymore for same-sex couples to access what I'm calling is a marriage certificate. But what I'm not sure about, what I want to ask you is a civil union the same as a marriage certificate? Are same-sex couples actually really accessing a marriage certificate that has the same benefits? Because now I'm learning that same-sex couples with a civil union, they come into some snags when it comes to benefits like adoption, children, inheritance in times of death. Is there a difference still at Home Affairs?
Not that I know of. I think the only thing I understood is that marriages are more difficult to terminate than civil unions.
Oh.
And the marriage is between a woman and a man. And I would assume that is closely linked to sex, you know, because that's how we derive our gender in our society, from sex assigned at birth. And so I think those are only two really distinct categories. I can be wrong here. But I think, you know, you get into a civil union in communal property like you do with a marriage, unless you get a prenuptial or then have an agreement to marry out of community or property. And then perhaps then the benefits thereof would be the same, that if I die and I still would be liable to the debts and to the assets of my spouse, as with the marriage as well.
So basically, you are saying heterosexual couples have got two options. They can choose to have a civil union or they can choose a marriage. But same-sex couples can't choose a marriage. They've only got access to a civil union.
Civil union, definitely.
Well, that's not completely.
That's the snag. Yeah.
Yeah, we must not be so quick to celebrate these civil unions if we can't get married, right? And
right. I mean, I think the question is why can't we all be married?
Yeah. Why is there a different name for our marriages that they call civil unions, right? According to government papers and stuff. I am going to ask the last few questions because we are going into we're actually over time. What do you do for fun, Savuka?
I need to get the charger quickly. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Can I release and get my charger?
Yeah, please do.
I don't want to lose.
I need to release you. We've got 5 minutes left, I think. I knew this conversation was going to take long. We've even skipped some of the questions. I think we got excited in the beginning talking about sexiness, but it was important for us to talk about being sexy. What do you do for fun?
Of course.
You got hidden talents that we don't know about.
I talk. I think I love engaging and unpacking with friends who are like-minded, who understand the dynamics of society. As I said, I studied sociology, so I think I'm obsessed with just how these identities interact. And I think I have one of the best moments with friends and acquaintances, speaking and engaging on politics over glasses of wine. I think that's what it is. And I think I've also unleashed a bit of karaoke.
Oh, I'm waiting for some fun. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, definitely.
What is the most important material possession to have, and do you have it?
Does my body count?
Thank you.
My body is my most important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My body is the most important thing.
Yeah. And what are your rules on online dating? Views or
be
rules?
Safe.
Be safe, ne?
Be safe. I feel like physical in-person dating is difficult enough with the person here. You're never really fully aware of who they are. They could, easily, capsize and, show you a different side of them. But you always need to be safe and trust in your instincts. Don't disclose your personal details on one go.
Yeah.
Maybe meet in a public space.
Yeah.
For the first few times, introduce them to friends.
Yes.
And then, if you feel like you're ultimately very comfortable, you can maybe take it forward.
I feel like you and me should be like creating this how-to guide when it comes to online datings. People are so afraid. No, don't do it. Don't do it. It's so dangerous. But maybe there's a how-to guide, just in J rules. I really like what you've already said. Don't give your phone number before you meet them in person. Don't introduce them to your friends. I like this, and we must work on that. So what is your way?
Yeah, I take that seriously.
How to online dating.
Yeah.
You can even rate the online dating sites. Just J,
Yeah, definitely. And maybe on a different podcast as well.
No, this will be quite saucy. Be like, listen, this particular person. Let's have it saucy, even out the people that are dangerous. This person named this. There've been quite a few reports that this person, also known as this name and also known as that name. just, to warn people out there, because we have experiences with the same people that we don't have a directory of sexual offenders and online dating.
Yeah, which they should be.
It should be. It shouldn't be this playground that isn't monitored, right?
Yeah.
And
List
what
of
is
offenders, definitely.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to finish us off. Hey, we've gone overboard. Normally these things are an hour and a half max. We're close to 2 hours now. But what is your wish for the entire LGBTI community? I'm not going to just say androgynous, non-binary. What is our best possible future? What can we aim for?
Happiness is vague, right? Because we think that happiness is just a state of mind, and I think a lot of factors around us also impact on what happiness looks like, and if we can express that. I think I want love, self-love, and love of community, and to feel like they belong, and for me, seeing yourself as a human being first and foremost, and seeing others as human beings reinforces that ideology of Ubuntu, that I am because we are, and we're a community, we are lesbian, or we trans, or bisexual, but we're LGBT, but we're human, and we're like made of, more solid substance than just individual parts, and now yourself, don't treat yourself as an individual part, maybe just your genital, or just your face, or just this, but as a whole entity that deserves to live and to thrive and to love and be loved and to exude all this passion and be everything that you were meant to be and more. Because you really only have this life. We're never sure of what's happening post our deaths. So I wish all of us could get the best of this and live our truths in harmony, in love with others, and just rock this earth. And enjoy the gift that we are. The gift that we offer the world as people who have diverse sexual and gender expressions and identities, that we offer this thing, the erotic, that people hide, or that are forced to hide because of these binaries. But we challenge it, and we offer different ways of expressing it and viewing it and being. And so I think just that alone, understanding that and living through that truth, is one of the keys to happiness, or to life. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love the part when you say we must even treat ourselves as individual parts, because sometimes, we think like, hey man, without what I do down there, I don't have any other talent. Without my pretty face, I don't have any other qualities to offer, right? And then describe yourself in one word. This is my final question.
Transgressive.
Transgressive.
That's it.
Savuka, siyabulela, siyabonga. We are grateful as Tholwana Molemo to once again to be, engaging with you guys, you individually, and bringing what you do as gender dynamics on board. Well, let's work together. You know what I mean? Like let's give each other advice with our trans community, non-binary community here.
That's a community
in the Free State. Let's see how often we can access services from this side or from that side that are needed over here. So we're going to definitely be keeping in touch, and really appreciate you being here. I don't know if you've got any last words.
Definitely looking forward to viewing more of these spaces. If anyone has questions or intrigued, we have our website, genderdynamics.org. where you can just check it out and see, how you can get some resources, can call the helpline, can call our offices, and, gender galore, we'll be there to assist with some of your questions. But otherwise, thank you so much for the opportunity of gracing your beautiful presence, Nosana. Just the energy that you brought to the conversation for me is just, what I think the community is in a nutshell.
Oh man, it's my pleasure. Thanks for agreeing. Thanks also for bringing yourself. Until next time, I can't wait to see you, man. You must take care. Bye to everybody. Put your questions in there. We'll answer them later. All right then. Cheers, everyone.
Bye, everyone.